Welcome to the Steps Back to Me podcast. On this show, we talk about all things that empower you to take control of your life and win it. I'm your host, Deb J. On this podcast, we're on a mission to provide guidance, emotional support, and practical tools that will inspire you on your path to living your best life ever. My guest on today's episode is Kimberly Kelley. Kimberly is an 8-year United States Air Force veteran, an author, neuro-linguistic hypnotherapist, and an avid pickleball player. Kimberly has reinvented her life many times, and she documented her steps and processes in her first book, No Shame, No Blame: Living an Empowered Life After Divorce. Kimberly is currently documenting what she calls her wild woman adventures on her website, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as working on her next book. Here's my conversation with Kimberly. Welcome, Kimberly, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you so much, Deb. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me here today.
Yes, I'm excited to hear your story and to get your adventures out there. So, we're discussing what it takes to rebuild life after divorce or other life-altering events. So please tell us a bit about yourself and your story.
Well, as you talked about in the intro, I'm a veteran. I have just recently moved to Panama, the country of Panama, not Panama City, Florida, and I just love it here. I wanted to move because I had been through a divorce after 3 years. I've been divorced now almost 4 years, come to think of it, and I just needed a new start. I needed something to really jettison me into a new being, and I'll be 70 this month, and I just knew that it was going to be now or never. There's no way I was going to be able to stay in that community where I had been a minister, where I'd worked in the local theater, where so many people knew me as one thing, and I needed to just break out and reinvent myself yet again. So that's what's really been driving this whole trip or this whole stay in Panama. And I'll be here for at least 1, maybe 2 years, maybe more.
Well, I don't want to sound cliche, but you do not look 70 years old. I mean, I don't know what my thoughts are that 70-year-old. I don't know if you're supposed to be walking with a cane or whatever, but you look, you look very spry and, not anywhere near the end of your life or anything. So that's
not even close. Right. My mom was 97 and a half, and she just passed last October, a year ago October. So I figure I've probably got a good 30 years left.
There we go. That works.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, but why Panama?
Well, I had several specific requirements. I wanted to live on the beach, affordably on the beach, and I knew there was no place in the United States I could do that, or at least no place I'd want to live in the United States. I wanted to just go somewhere where there were lots of expats, and it was sort of a normal thing that there would be expats there, because I didn't want to be too disconnected, and I wanted to go someplace where there was pickleball. But in the interim, while I was researching, I found that there are many different benefits to being a pensionado, which is what I am, like a pensioned person, where you get Social Security or you get a retirement for the rest of your life. And there's so many things. In fact, I was just down at the restaurant and I got my 15% because I'm what they call a jubilado. But I also wanted to speak Spanish because I wanted to get more embedded and be part of the culture. I wanted to be able to live among the Panamanians and feel comfortable speaking and getting to understand their culture and what they value. And I really found out that they value pretty much the same things we do. Yes. They really do. Freedom, family, love, things like that.
Yes, isn't that the international wish or need, people?
It is.
So, go back and, we're talking about post-divorce. So go back, give us a little history of Who is
Mhm.
Kimberly? You said you were divorced 3 years ago, but let's go back a little farther.
Okay.
You know.
Um, so I was raised in a little town called Kearney, Arizona. It was a mining town, and it was very safe there. It was a small town. I was raised in a wonderful family. I have two brothers and a sister that loved me as much as I loved them. They're all older than I am. Um, I got really involved in sports because there wasn't a whole lot to do in my little town. So I got really involved in sports like my brother and my sister. And I just decided that that was kind of the way my life was going to go. I wasn't going to be a corporate person. I wasn't going to do, all these fancy things that people wanted to do. And I never did really go to a 4-year college. I went to college for a variety of things, just things I wanted, like dance and music, and I wanted to learn about math, about geometry and geography and all kinds of different things. So I wasn't going for a degree. I just wanted to learn things. I was kind of a precocious child. I ended up pregnant when I was 15, had my daughter when I was 16. So any further thoughts of education sort of went out the window. I gave her up for adoption. Um, and then I graduated from high school and went on to the United States Air Force. It was a great way to get additional education. And it gave me an opportunity to break out of that mold. Back in the 70s, women were nurses, they were admins, some sort of secretary, or they were just waitresses or something. That was not me. I did not want that life. Although I did it for a little while, but not for very long. No, I loved that aspect of the Air Force. It was very tough and it was not fair at the time, but in the 70s, women they were not welcome in the military in most areas. They were considered, I don't know, ancillary to what the mission was, but that wasn't the reality. That was pretty much just the reality of the old school, like the tech sergeants and the master sergeants. And in fact, I got told several times I should be home pregnant and barefoot.
Wow.
And that I was taking away a perfectly good job away from a man. So I got married in the Air Force, had another child, and I stayed in for almost 8 years, just shy of 8 years. Then I came back to the United States. I worked in an office as a legal secretary, but I had this opportunity to learn something different, which was computers. And I learned electronics in the military, and that set me up for the foundation, for the fundamentals of computing. And then I went on to use computers as a temp in law firms. And I fell in love with computers. I fell in love with technology, and that's pretty much where I stayed much of the rest of my life.
That's amazing. So I started taking a gander at your book, and you mentioned
Uh-huh.
that you said you were divorced 3 years ago, but that was your fourth marriage.
It was. I was married and divorced 3 times my first 10 years out of high school.
Wow.
So when I got married this last time, I I was terrified of getting divorced because I was thinking that everybody was going to judge me for being divorced again, and didn't want that on I just did not want that on me. So I did everything. I put up with a lot to stay married for 30 years. And he was my fourth one. So, and I was crazy about him. Absolutely crazy. But I didn't have the terminology, I didn't have the knowledge of what a narcissistic personality was. And not to necessarily label him as a narcissist, because he's a musician. He was in his little niche genre. He was a very well-known musician. And honestly, I think most musicians, most people out front, whether they're ministers or actors, I think they have to have some modicum of narcissism further along the scale than you or I might have to really survive the business, because they've got to be in it for them. It's just a whole mindset that I've learned subsequent to the divorce. And so if I'd have known that, I probably could have stayed married, but I wasn't happy anyway. And as the book talks about, I realized how the many ways I shoved him out the door, because he's the one that filed for divorce.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say is the number one step or steps a woman can take to set herself on a path of reclaiming her life after divorce? Because you've done it a number of times.
Yeah. Number one is really take a close look at what your part in the marriage was. And again, it's not about blame or shaming yourself or your ex. It's just about, and this was very difficult for me, because in the beginning, I wanted to blame him. In fact, the very first book I wrote was, I tell people I vomited all about him. It was his fault. He was this, he was that, he did this, he did that. Well, yeah, he did. And that's just what he did. But it was my responses to them. Was I forgiving? Was I understanding? Did I love him enough to look past his weaknesses? And the truth was no. And I was miserable in that scenario. So I always had this internal struggle with, how do I stay married in a marriage I'm so miserable in? I didn't like him. I loved him intensely, but really not enough to say, you know what, I'm just going to overlook this, overlook his dalliances and his narcissism and his shaming me and blaming me for everything. And I just couldn't do that. I couldn't do it after a while.
So it starts with you. As we're talking to our audience, that it starts with me.
Absolutely starts with me. So I had to go back and change that narrative. And that narrative begins with, what am I telling myself? That is where everybody can start. What is the story I'm telling myself? Are you telling yourself he's to blame? I didn't do anything wrong. I did everything right, Well, that's what I was telling myself. And I started thinking back at some of the things that happened in our life together. And I realized, no, I did a lot of things wrong. But I had to just come back to that and say, but it's not about blaming me either. Because you cannot be powerful in your own self if you are blaming others for where you are. And that was a tough lesson. No, it's not his fault that you are unhappy, but it's not your fault either. It's just the narrative you're telling yourself. So you learn to tell a different story. Yes, I was that way, and that's okay, because I wasn't happy, and I can see how I pushed him out the door to give me the freedom to be happy in my own right.
So how did you find the courage then to have another relationship?
I haven't had one. It's because after 30 years, I really needed to find me again, because we were in the entertainment business together. And I never had the opportunity to have good friends, female or male, because we were traveling all the time. So we did 160 shows a year. So we were always in the motorhome. We were always driving, always going to the next show. And that's no way to develop relationships. When you arrive on a Friday, you do the gig Saturday, Sunday, and you leave on Sunday night, you don't have time to develop those relationships. So after all this, I started creating better and more sustainable relationships with my women friends. And in fact, the woman that my ex left me for and I are best friends. I liked her before. She was a friend of mine, and
a story is all the time.
Yeah. But I come back to the reality that I had to thank her for being the impetus for him to leave. because otherwise I'd still be in the marriage. I wouldn't have probably not have left. I'd rather stay in it and not be embarrassed at being divorced for the fourth time, you know, than, and I'd rather stay married.
Dig into that a little bit. That's the embarrassment. I was thinking in terms of fear or trepidation. I hadn't thought about embarrassment.
It was embarrassment because I just thought everybody was going to judge me. Mostly my family, and truthfully, my family didn't judge me at all. They're just like, "We're so glad you're finally happy." You know, we're so glad because that's just not my family to embarrass me or anything. It was just me. That was a story I was telling myself that there was something wrong with me because now I was divorced for the fourth time. I don't know why the third time didn't bother me, but the fourth time, for some reason, that was a problem. I don't know why, but they didn't. All they want from me is to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you say, as I've talked to clients, I've talked to friends, people who question themselves or blame themselves, like you say, make them embarrass themselves. What would you say to a woman who comes to you, a client who comes to you and says, I'm just embarrassed. I don't know how to move forward. I feel stuck. What advice do you give them?
Oh, find your happy. What is it going to make? What is it going to take to make you happy? Don't think about what would have made him happy in the past. You know, I never realized how much I loved chocolate ice cream. It was always, what does he want? I mean, the ridiculousness of it. And so what makes you happy? For me, it was my dogs. Where do you want to live? Where do you want to travel? What do you want to do with the rest of your life? Because you've got it now, especially after the divorce. You can do anything you want. This is like ground zero. So from this moment on, you tell me what makes you happy. And so then from there, we start creating strategies to find that happy. And I love it. And, we'll do things like cord cutting and little ritual type things to really separate yourself from that energy of that other person. Because as long as you're blaming them or blaming yourself, there's an energy exchange. And if you don't want that person in your life, you've got to find a way to cut that cord. And so we have this, it's been done for probably thousands of years. It's just a way to cut that energy so that you're free of any negative emotion towards that person. It won't serve anybody in the future, ever. It never does.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with looking at yourself and not thinking that I'm selfish. So, I hear that a lot. Isn't it selfish I came out of a culture of even a religious culture that teaches, to give of yourself, to be selfless. And I think sometimes, especially if you've been in a relationship or a situation where you have lost yourself, you may think that you're selfish. So how do you respond to that?
Yes, be selfish. If you're good. Because what are you doing when you give somebody else all your energy? You're making them selfish. So what do you have to give? What do you have to give back to yourself? Because you're the only person you have to please. And if you're not happy, if you're not fulfilled, you're not going to be happy in a relationship, no matter what. If you're always resenting the other person because, well, I've got to do this for him or that for him or her, it could be same-sex couples. But if you're always doing for the other person, you're really missing out on the juice of life.
Right.
My juice of life is all about, that's right, you can't pour from an empty cup. And there's so much, you're right, there's a lot of religious about that, to make other people happy. Well, number one, you can't make anybody happy. The only person you make happy is yourself. So forget that you think you can make somebody happy. You can't. And if they're trying to make you responsible for that, you need to run the other way.
Yeah. So, you say that it is self. You start with yourself. You start from the inside out. From you, you take care of you, take care of yourself, and then you have enough to give out.
That's true. And that taking care of yourself also includes just self-love. And so many people do not understand, women especially, do not understand the value of self-love. And I'm appalled at this. The more I work with people, the more I'm just so sad for them that they don't understand the value of self-love, that love that God gives you, or whatever deity or energy that you believe in. That is God given. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to sacrifice to be loved. You are enough. You're absolutely enough, 100% all by yourself.
But what if I don't believe that, Kimberly? How
That
do
is,
I get past it if I don't believe that? Just hearing it, how do I get past it?
well, there's a lot of things you can do. The first thing is you have to start where you're at, and just start with bubble baths. Just do that one thing a day, or 5 things. Somebody recommends 5 things, but just one thing a day, just for you, just because you want to do it. It could be sitting at the end of the day with a glass of wine. It could be a hot bubble bath. It could be a movie you want to watch. It could be any one thing, but do that thing do something every single day just for you. And then you start to develop this sense, because you're right, it doesn't just happen overnight, but it does start to develop this sense that, you know what, I'm okay. I can do this for myself. I do deserve it. I do deserve it. And of course, I start from where, like I said, where they're at, and if it happens to be from a religious standpoint, there's a little bit different tactic, which again, it all starts with God. God, does he want you to be miserable? Does he want you to not love yourself? Who are you to not love yourself for somebody that loves you? I mean, it's a tricky thing, but you always have to start where you're at. And that's, as you develop those different self-love skills, you can see how wonderful it is. Now, what I did, just because I wanted to do it, we had one of those gals, we had speakers in my spiritual center. And one of the gals, her name was Nicole. And she used to go into her bathroom as she had red hair, much redder than mine, all over the place. Mascara smeared, everything, just a mess first thing in the morning. And she would look in the mirror and she would say, "You are so beautiful. I love you." And just like she did, I didn't believe it in the beginning. I started doing it every morning. I just so, "You are so beautiful. I love you." "You are so wonderful. I love you." And I sounded like a robot. But then one day, I don't know, it was maybe like 2 or 3 weeks later, I just said, "I love you. You are so incredible." I started thinking of all the positive things about myself and juicing myself up. Look at all the things I can do. I'm great on the computer. I'm a really good athlete. I'm really active. I have a loving family. All these things that are positive about me and my life really help to focus when you're trying to learn to love yourself.
Yes, yes. Make it your
Yeah.
full-time job. That's one of the things when I went through my divorce that I did. I made it my second job because I had to have one to pay the bills. But my second job is to develop those skills. And I like that you use the term skills, which means
It is a skill.
it's something that can be learned. That if you apply
Absolutely.
yourself to it, it's something that can be learned.
Mm-hmm.
Give us one nugget to take away. If there was one thing you would want our audience to know and be able to put in practice as they embark on reclaiming, reinventing, and recalibrating their lives, what would that be?
Okay. It would be to mind your thoughts. Really watch what you're telling yourself. Watch what you're telling yourself. Use words like, I'm amazing. I'm just incredible. I'm free. I'm learning how to be happy. I'm learning to be all by myself because that's enough. But mind your thoughts and then change it, reframe it, whatever you need to do to reclaim that. You've given your power away a long time, and now it's time to take it back.
Oh, that is beautiful. Thank you. That's a great way to wrap this up. Again, Kimberly, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today, for sharing.
Thank you,
I know you had
Deb.
a
Thank
busy
you.
day, so we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for joining us on another powerful episode of the Steps Back to Me podcast. We hope you found inspiration and insights that will light your path on your journey of healing and self-discovery. And as we wrap up, always remember your story is a tapestry of strength, resilience, and hope. No matter where you are in your journey, you have the power to reclaim, reinvent, and recalibrate your life. Until next time, keep taking those steps back to the authentic you. Stay strong, stay inspired, and keep shining your light. I'm Deb J. Goodbye for now and see you on the next episode of Steps Back to Me.